So, can removing highways fix America's cities? And so, little do people or some people know that not all these highways were put there just so that people can get to and fro nice and easy as they would think. Believe it or not, there are some highways that were put up to divide people and to create divisions based on the powers that be their bias. And so this article, I think, really puts out a lot of uh, true facts that happen in terms of the reason why most of the highway is not really needed, and it actually has been causing more of a problem rather than a solution. So this is by Anaja Popovich and Denise Liu. And so you have here Sean Dunwoody, and he's an artist and community organizer on Union Street, where the inner loop has been filled. It's been filled in, and it's walkable. It's walkable hue urban development is underway. So this is in Rochester, New York. And so this was around May the 17th. So pretty much, he's kind of telling you, if anybody working on any of this would know, have to go back into history and find out why did they even do any of this. And then you will uncover yet again more social divide that created most of these freeways and highways. But built in the 1950s, the speeds suburban commuters, just speed suburban commuters to and from downtown Rochester inner loop destroyed hundreds of homes and businesses, replacing them with a broad concrete trench that separated downtown from the rest of the city. So now the city is looking to repair this damage. And so the reckoning is still occurring, believe it or not, and it's going to keep occurring over and over again. We're going to keep revisiting these issues because most of these things that we're hearing about or we see have already been orchestrated before we even came. We weren't even here. Uh, we weren't even born. And a lot of this was happening, when I was little. I remember just at that point seeing that it was just right after Martin Luther King was killed, and that Black Power movement was happening and had ended abruptly, and it was still semi going on, but it was heating up and turning a whole nother way, where it was more. There were protests. There were a lot of protests. There were people being silenced. There were people being murdered for speaking out on social rights. And I remember the vivid news press, um, all plastered across televisions, the television set. Even as a child, you can figure out something traumatic happened in a community of people, and a lot of people were voicing opinions about how they felt. It was a time when people were really trying to uplift um, black culture, and then they were also trying to uncover uh, the chaos that was unfolding with the shootings of Martin Luther King. And I remember just seeing him standing there, um, where he was I believe it was at that hotel, and um, it was on, they kept repeating it. It had already happened, but by the time I was born, but it was always being revisited for people to never forget. I guess it was so horrific because he was such a big figure in the community at that time. And so it just hadn't really ended with a lot of people. And so that was never going to be, and still to this day, never going to be forgotten how heinous that was. And I believe the Malcolm X thing as well, the shooting of him. And so, like it says here in this article, these highways were put up, and I was reading about this that there were organizations that were doing this to try to separate black communities and to try to destroy them, actually, and destroy the urban communities and just pretty much cause people to not really have anywhere to go and to move people further away. Um, as is what's happening now is what it sounds like with the gentrification. It's like the same mindset. It revisits over and over again. And so it says now the city's looking to repair this damage. So it started by filling in a nearly mile long section of the sunken road, slowly stitching a neighborhood back together. So today, visitors of the Inner Loop's eastern segment would hardly know a highway once ran beneath their feet. So, as mid century highways reach the end of their lifespan, cities across the country are having to choose whether to rebuild or reconsider them at all. And a growing number, like Rochester, are choosing to take these structures down. So the massive roads radically reshape cities, plowing through dense downtown neighborhoods, dividing many black communities and increasing car dependence. Which do we already have crazy roads, depend people, you got to get in your car for everything. And it makes more air pollution and more accidents and more car drama and traffic. Um, so, in order to accommodate cars and commuters, many cities basically destroyed themselves. So that doesn't sound so great, does it? That's not a good plan. But obviously, back then, whoever was doing this, they thought they were doing something, and they were making things worse for everyone. Said Now this was said by Norman Garrick, a professor at the University of Connecticut who studies that how transportation projects have reshaped American cities. So yeah, transportation has a little history in there of racism as well. So yeah, I don't know anything in America that doesn't have racism on it somewhere in there. So Rochester has shown what can be done in terms of reconnecting the city and restoring a sense of place, he said. So that's really the underlying goal of the highway removal. And so the project's successes and stumbling blocks provide lessons for other cities looking to retire some of their own aging highways. Nearly 30 cities nationwide are currently discussing some form of removal. And so, we hear shortage in housing and nowhere for people to go. And maybe if they take down some of these highways and build in those areas, once again, then maybe we'll have some more space for people to live instead of just getting in their car and riding everywhere and cluttering up the road and making more air pollution and congestion and traffic, and making things a little more where people can, get on. And they already had these projects with these Metrolinks, and so if you have a good amount of those, and it's an easier commute, it's cheaper, and it's less cars out there, then maybe that will help some of this. I'm assuming. So some like Syracuse and Detroit have committed to replacing stretches of interstate with more more connected, walkable neighborhoods as well. So others, like the New Orleans and Dallas, are facing pressure from local residents and activists to address the pollution, noise, and safety hazards brought on by mega roads. And so the growing movement has been energized by support from Biden administration, which has made addressing racial justice and climate change major themes in the debate over highway removal central to its agenda. And so, in a wide reaching infrastructure plan released at the end of March, President Joe Biden proposed $20 billion to help reconnect neighborhoods divided by highways. And so, congressional Democrats have translated the proposal into a legislation that would provide funding over the next 5 years, and the Department of Transportation open up a separate grant that could help some cities get started. And so Pete Buttigieg, who heads the department, has expressed support for removing barriers that divide black and minority communities, saying that there is racism physically built into some of our highways. Exactly, that's what I said before we got to the fly. So I'm already knowing because I read something far earlier that there actually were freeways or highways that were some of these highways that were put up to keep black people further away so they couldn't even go to their jobs where they were working. They were finding all kind of ways to try to make life more miserable for black folks, and like, as if they don't already do, but it just added more to the pot of misery. But mid-century highway projects often targeted black neighborhoods, destroying cultural and economic centers as well, and bridging decades of environmental harm. Okay, well, it was bringing, yeah, it was bridging, but he was making bridges of hate, roads and highways of hate. So it was bringing decades of environmental harm. And so that's the reason why we have all these issues right now. So Congress is still haggling over Biden's infrastructure plan, but experts say that they proposed funding for highway removal represents a shift in the way the government approaches transportation projects. As recently as a decade ago, Peter D. Norton, a transportation historian at the University of Virginia, every transportation problem was a problem to be solved with new roads. So now the impacts of the roads are beginning to enter the equation. So back to a neighborhood. Federal and state funds have historically gone to building highways, not removing them. But in 2013, the city of Rochester in upstate New York won nearly about $18 million grant from an Obama administration that allowed it to take out the eastern segment of its sunken inner loop freeway known as locally as the Moat. And so for those that live in that area, they're probably very familiar with it. And so the project turned a 6-lane highway with access roads running alongside into a narrow boulevard, and the rest of the land was open up for development. So people have already moved into the townhouse style apartments where the highway once stood. Scooters, bicycles share space with cars along the new Union Street corridor, a once unlikely sight, and so several cross streets cut off by the highway have been reconnected, encouraging more walking in the area. And the big fear of removing a highway, terrible traffic, hasn't materialized. So, Lovely Warren, who has served as Rochester's mayor since 2014, said the project is proof that the city can undo some of its mistakes. So there's a whole bunch of other things that need to be undone, and it ain't just in Rochester, New York. So that's just my comment right there. So it's a lot of things, other things that need to be undone or fixed. So in the past, we created a way for people to get on the highway and go directly out of their community, she said. Adding the highways also created barriers as well that were really detrimental to communities that were left behind. So now Rochester is trying a different approach. Instead of moving people in and out of downtown as quickly as possible, the city's trying to make downtown a more livable place as well. And so, highway removal and other deconstruction projects are part of a long term plan for the city still struggling to come back from years of economic and population decline. So, the big bet, rebuilding more walkable, bikeable, and connected neighborhoods will attract new investment and new residents as well. And the city's officials hope it might even reduce the car dependence in the long run as well, because that has contributed to a lot of pollution. The cars, but rebuilding. That's why they need to do the eco-friendly and all this stuff, and you know, now they're trying to figure out how to make cars where they don't need gas, and and then I'm hearing those ain't that good either, because you can't drive them that far. So, yeah, you're gonna have to come up with something better than that. So, 4 years after this sunken freeway, it says rebuilding the neighborhood from scratch. It isn't easy or quick, but 4 years after the sunken freeway was filled, many buildings along the corridor are still under construction, and new businesses have not yet moved in to the spaces, including the planned pharmacy and the grocery store they want there. So local residents and businesses owners said that they were glad to see the highways go, but many of them had mixed feelings about what followed after that. So there might be some other stuff, you know. I mean, housing is an issue, it's a crisis. And, building affordable housing, sometimes it ain't affordable for everyone. It may be affordable for some people, but how affordable are we talking? That might be the other issue. So, you know, they might be looking at this, or we're battling a new animal, affordability of homes. They said moving in new residents might mean moving out black residents. And I'm just being honest here, because that's what a lot of this stuff is. They try to find all kinds of ways to say they fix one problem, and then you have a new problem, or a problem that wasn't really new. It was always there, and they're trying to find a new avenue to try to separate people. And they don't really do what they say they're going to do entirely. And so it says the success was it got filled, but you now have people living somewhere that it was just road before, said Sean Dunwoody, okay, an artist, a community organizer who lives in Market View Heights, a neighborhood near the removal site where he was standing. You saw him pictured in the beginning of this article. And so we don't have the moat, that was there. It was called the moat, he said, walking along the new corridor. But now when you look down, there's just a whole series of walls, he added, pointing to the large new apartment buildings that repeat down the Union Street. And so others echo the concern that the redevelopment project brought in too many higher end apartments. Now I already know what's going on, because that's what's happening not only in New York, it's happening in LA, it's happening in Georgia, it's happening anywhere. Let me be honest with you, anywhere where black people are, the same stuff is happening. It's just they got different people doing it, but they doing the same thing. The same thing. It's like they all collectively got their heads together. Well, how are we gonna move these black people out of here? We move the road. They want to get rid of the road, and we want to get rid of these black folks too. So that's the way they're thinking. But they won't say it. But it's what they show. That's how they price you out of the neighborhood. You can't afford to live there, and that's another way to keep you out. And so that's what's been going on all over the place. And so that's why you see all these people, and they got so crazy that they not only moving black folks, they move poor people out, or anybody don't have no money to pay that high ass rent, and you moved out too. So that's the way to look at it. And so you know what's going on. They trying to sweep. They trying to use their big broom to sweep everyone out. And so others echoed the concern of this situation here. They move these higher end apartments up, building them up, though a portion of the reserved of the lower income tenants and the other vulnerable groups, without opening up a space for the public. So they um and no parks and no plazas. They don't want you there. That's what it is. So Eric Frisch, a transportation specialist for the city who worked in the inner loop eastern removal, said the project has so far fulfilled its main goals. And we see what that is. And bringing in new, and think about it, listen to that, new investment and in living the city's east end. But the new neighborhood is still a work in progress because they ain't got the people in there they want to get in there. And the people they want out hadn't left yet. So they try to work on that. So they don't want to tell you what they want to do, but that's what's going on. So Rochester, now, let me just be honest, because that's what's happening everywhere. Let's not tell a lie here. But rebuilding the neighborhood is not just an add water, mix, and stir type of situation, said Emily Morey, who works in the Rochester Public Library and has written about the neighborhoods raised by Inner Loop's construction, so you can set up all the infrastructure you like, but there's a human factor in it, which takes all these different buildings and turns them into actual viable communities. And so that's what that's what they in the room in these boardrooms haggling over. Okay, we moving in all these new businesses. Who's this gonna be for? And who are the new people moving in? And what about the people that always was once there? Where they gonna go? So this is where they're they're arguing amongst each other. Wait a minute, we gotta make these communities livable for everyone, not just people who can afford it. You know, so Rochester is now looking to take down more of the inner loop highway, starting with the northern arm. It's called the northern arm. Officials hope the experience from the first removal will help expedite this process. So it took more than 2 decades. Listen to that. 2 decades of planning to break ground of the inner loop east removal, even though the project faced fewer obstacles than most. So the eastern highway segment never carried the traffic it was built to serve and to begin with. So its removal faced a scant opposition from the daily commuters and the business groups. And so the aging road was due to a major upgrade, which would have cost much more than the entire removal process altogether. And there were a lot of people already living along that corridor. So funding and expertise were the biggest barriers to the removal. So a few highways had been taken down in the past, but there was no real template. San Francisco's, it's called the Embarcadero Freeway, was irreparably damaged by an earthquake in 1989 and removed 2 years later. Other more recent removals targeted waterfront highways and short spurs rather than segments of the working highway. We are a bit of proof of concept with said Frisch. So sorry if I messed your name up. The city's transportation specialist that's there is talking about this. Removing the northern arm of the inner loop presents a new challenge, and so that section of the highway carries much more traffic, and its removal would reconnect two long divided neighborhoods, Market View Heights, a majority of Black and Hispanic lower income community north of the inner loop, Grove Place, and a whiter, wealthier enclave to the south. Wow, isn't that interesting? So it's a history behind all of that. And so I was reading about it and I was like, this is crazy. I read it actually about it. It was in a book, and as a matter of fact, the book is called, I'm looking at it, The Color of Law by Richard Rothenstein. So he goes into detail about how freeways and highways were put up to divide many black people and move black and poor black Hispanic people out of communities that they couldn't even go and travel to neighborhoods to go to work. It was just prohibiting people for a lot of lot of reasons of racism. And so the current residents of Market View Heights, the crucial question is, what will reconnection bring? More opportunity or less pollution? Which one? And another round of displacement. Is that the question? Is this really going to help people, or is it another, like what I was saying, you know, their real intention is to move higher incomes in and move poor income people out. And so that's another fight. And so dozens of projects in the recent year, more cities have started to seriously rethink some of their highways. So the Congress for the New Urbanism, a group that tracks highway removals, counted 33 proposed projects in 28 American cities. And so the idea is being discussed in many others. So, if rebuilding cities is done right, highway removal projects could make life better for local residents as well as the planet itself. So, Garrick, University of Connecticut, this person is from, because denser and less car-centric neighborhoods are crucially important in reducing greenhouse gases that are causing climate change as well. So, the proposed replacements and their benefits vary. So some follow Rochester's model, turning former highways into smaller walkable boulevards. Others are covering highways with parks and or merely replacing them with highway-like streets. And so nationwide, many cities also continue to expand highways. A growing number of removal projects are grappling with the question of environmental justice, central to Biden's proposal as well. Historically, vulnerable communities have had little to say in infrastructure decisions because your voice is never heard. And if you do have a voice, they either try to figure out how to censor it or how to get rid of you altogether, or, and silence you for good, in not so great ways. So when the National Interstate Highway System was built in 1950s and 60s, it connected the country like never before, but it plowed through cities with little concern for the local effects that were going to take place in the future. So the state highways and the connectors, roads compounded the damage. So highway, freeways, expressways were also always hostile to cities. I said, Norton of the University of Virginia, but they were particularly hostile to the black communities. Let's just be real here. He's being honest. Let's be real. It was to basically hurt black communities. So in cities like Detroit, New Orleans, Richmond, Virginia, and many more, LA, interstates and other highways were often built through thriving black neighborhoods in the name of slum clearance. Let me read that again. In cities like Detroit, New Orleans, Richmond, Virginia, and many more, and I'm going to say LA, LA, because this is the truth. Federal, interstate, and other highways were often built through thriving black neighborhoods in the name of what they call, quote unquote, slum clearance. They want to get rid of black folks. And they want to get rid of the what they call the slums or the ghetto or whatever they wanted to call it, which they are the reason why they were put there in the first place. Those same people claiming they want to get rid of it, basically oppress people and put people in a condition that they had to be living close together like that anyway. So most highway projects fit into a broader program of urban renewal that reshaped American cities in the mid 20th century, displacing more than 1 million people across the country, most of them black. Cities replaced dense mixed-use neighborhoods and mega projects like convention centers, malls, and highways. And so the public housing was built that was when public housing was built, it usually replaced many fewer units than were destroyed. And so that basically is saying what I just said. It's saying I'm already reading ahead before I even read it. So clearing blighted, and that was another term they used, blighted neighborhoods, which was usually a reference to low income black areas, was the intentional goal of many urban highway projects, said Lynn Richards, president of the Congress for the New Urbanism, which advocates for more sustainable cities. But where one person sees urban blight, another person sees relatively a stable neighborhood. So highways didn't just destroy communities, they often reinforced racial divides as well. So that's why you see people hating each other. You stay on your side of the road and all this kind of stuff within cities. So white American increasingly fled cities altogether, allowing newly built roads to grow a growing suburb. And so the white people wanted to move to the suburbs because it was a white flight, and then they left the blacks in their areas. And but the black residents were largely barred from doing the same thing. So you couldn't afford to move to those areas because they was doing the pricing out, and they had this thing called covenants where you couldn't go in certain communities because it restricted you from living there. And then they made it so expensive you couldn't live there no way if you wanted to. So uh, basically what it was going into, that the black residents were largely barred from doing the same, and government policies denied them access to federally backed mortgages, and private discrimination narrowed the options even further. So that's basically what I was talking about by the covenants that was going on. It's a covenant where you have a group of people there. It's almost like having like a little club, and you ain't in it. If you ain't white, you ain't right. So they don't want you in it. You ain't in a white club, then get out. And so that's basically what that was. They didn't want you in that neighborhood. And you better not come bring your car and your dog and none of that stuff and your kids and none of your family and nobody up in there that looked black, because they just wanted only white residents and only people. Now it's like who can afford it? And it's still, that racism is still there. It's racism and classism in a mixed bag. You got uppity folks that don't want you in certain communities because you ain't got the money, you can't afford it, then you ain't in that club. And if you ain't white, you still got them people there. And so now you got a mixed bag. You ain't voted for the people that they voted for, and then you ain't in the club. So we got that going on. That's what's happening right now. But it's just got different people doing it, the same stuff. But it's like, they just found clever ways to do it. So now they trying, oh, we gonna fix the communities, but they want their new businesses and their new residents. So listen to those words now. So in effect, that left many black residents, when this was going on, which is still going on, living along the highway path. So in March, Biden named the New Orleans Claiborne Expressway as a vivid example of how highway construction divided communities and led to environmental injustice. And so the highway looms over Claiborne Avenue, once an oak line boulevard that served as an economic heart and soul of black community in New Orleans. And said an Amy Stelly, a local resident, Amy Stelly. She's local resident and urban planner who has been pushing for the expressway removal for most of the last decade. So a part of the theme of this theme are, as it has read, Treen neighborhood. The Claiborne Avenue corridor was a meeting space for local residents and the site of a Black Mardi Gras celebration at the time when the festival was still segregated. Okay, and so see, these are things that these young people before me, before I was born, a lot of this had happened, and so when we were growing up, we were learning of it, and now still knowing more of it, as anybody that's in there, you know that's in their probably 40s, late 40s and or early 50s, is now, if you're into reading about all of this, you're learning of all of this stuff, or you've been learning about it, and the people that are coming after you say, well, why didn't you guys fix it? We were learning about it too. We were born in it, and we were learning about it. We saw things, and it wasn't quite clear, but we knew there was something going on. And a lot of us spoke out, and I believe the hip hop era was what we were in. That was supposed to be a way of speaking out and being expressive through music. But somehow they got in there and infiltrated and turned the music where it became a vice used against us. So we had some people that figured out ways to just look at it as a money thing, and it has also destroyed people. And that's a whole history behind that. You ought to do a lesson on that and put that in the schools so people can better understand where that whole thing came from, because that is a history behind all of it. And so in the mid 60s, in 1960, of getting to this article, believe it or not, they were trying to keep people out for the Mardi Gras celebration. So black people had to figure out how to do their own Mardi Gras. So in the mid 1960s, the oak trees were ripped out to make way for the highway cleaving the neighborhood into two. Okay. And so, over a following decade, the once middle class area fell into decline. So, today the expressway corridor is polluting, and so local residents suffer higher than average rates of asthma, and the soil is contaminated with lead. And as a result of years of leaded gasoline use in the car traveling on into and out of the downtown area, the area is removing the highway, however, is raising some of the same concerns heard in Rochester. See what I said? The same concerns heard in Rochester. So not repeating mistakes. So this is the end of the article. They're trying to figure out how to make solutions so that they don't repeat some of these old things that have happened that have caused all these problems. Which, really, to be honest with you, before I read this, they are repeating it in different ways. They're going to find another way. You're going to have different people that were raised. Now you have another group that was raised to hate. Let's be honest here, because a lot of young people say, well, why did you guys didn't fix? We did. A lot of people tried to fight the same people, tried to fight with people of our age, and you got them. You see what happened in January 6th. These are the people that they're around our age, but they want to get rid of democracy. They don't want to share. They don't want to change. And then you got other people who's to do, and it's going to keep going on like that, because you got people that are raised to divide, are raised to have these beliefs, are raised to hate, are raised to have biases against people that, oh, well, we got money, how come you don't got no money? Stuff like that. How come you don't got this? And how come you got, well, you see, Oprah's got money. How come you can't do that? Everybody ain't Oprah. Everybody ain't Denzel. Everybody ain't Magic Johnson. So, people don't think, they just do. And it hurts a lot of folks. And so that's what happens. So the older residents of Rochester, this article saying, Market View Heights neighborhood still remembers the displacement that caused the destruction of the inner loop. That was caused by the construction of the inner loop. So when this inner loop was created, it caused displacement, just like what happens. And I'm gonna use LA. That's what they're talking about right now. All this homelessness, all the beaches we got out here. California's known for all the beaches and all the sun and the palm trees. That let me anybody looking at this, if you're not from California, or if you're in California, you know what I'm talking about. The beaches don't look like how they used to look. It's homeless encampments, and right now they're fighting over whether they wanted to make like little homeless homes. And I hate to say it like that, but that's what they want. They wanted to put up some little housing for the homeless people to stay on the beach. And the people that live up by the beach are wealthy, rich people, and they don't want them there. They want them to get out, and it's messing up the way the beach look. Too, the other thing is, now on behalf, I'm not trying to be mean, but some of the people can be violent. Some of the homeless people can be violent, And it's not everyone, but some of them are violent. And so that's the thing. There's fear because when some of those people are walking up along there taking a bike, they don't know if they're gonna get hit up inside the head or robbed or something like that. And so already your mindset, these are rich people living up here, and you see these people jogging and walking, and they got their dog, and they look like they ain't got a care in the world. They must got some money. And then here you are, if you're not really there for the right reason, you're there to rob people. That would be the place to do it because you would assume that you're robbing people that if they live up there and they must live along there, they must have some money because that's the only people that can live up by the beach because it's so expensive. That beachfront property is through the roof, and I believe it's a lot more expensive than what it once was. So that's what we're having a lot of homelessness and a lot of fight about some of the same issues that's in this article here. There's a lot of displacement, and even now, the pandemic that caused some more displacement. We had a lot of people that even right now they're trying to figure out how to keep people in their homes. So I understand this full well what's going on. So many people now fear a second wave if it is removed. That a common argument, said Dunwoody, is that the artist and the community organizer is that if the highway is removed, folks are now going to be looking at the neighborhoods and bringing in. Now listen to this. Now we're not trying to be mean, and I know what Dunwoody's talking about. Yoga studios and coffee shops to move us out, and we know who can afford those things because it ain't us. All this stuff to move us out, high priced, overpriced coffee and yoga studios and spinning classes and all this other stuff like this that you can't afford to go to and moving black folks out. And so people don't want to get gentrified exactly and get pushed out and priced out, he said. And so that's what they've been doing here in LA. That's what's been happening the whole while. And it's not happening just here, but it's happening it seems like everywhere you look, it's happening. They got their heads together. They said, we're going to get all these people out of here. And it's mean. It is mean. It is mean. This is racist, and it's mean, and it's discriminatory. And they find ways, if they get rid of one hell, they bring in a new one. That's the way it looks like. And so to make sure that the city officials listen to these concerns, Dunwoody started a local advocacy group 3 years ago by Suzanne Mayer, who lives on the other side of the highway in Grove Place neighborhood. So the group called Hinge Neighbors, okay, aims to bring local residents in the planning process. And so at the community meeting in the Market View Heights in the early May, the biggest question on people's minds was whether the highway should come down, but what will replace it? And so that's the big looming question for them. So McQuell Powell, a local resident and business owner working on a prison re-entry program, worried that more large-scale apartments like those built in East End would come to the neighborhood, and that would totally change the whole dynamic, he said. And Market View Heights is mostly freestanding single-family homes, and some are subdivided, and most are rented. And so Nancy Makuska, who is in her 60s, said that she wants to see more family-centric development in the area if the highway is removed and some parks to replace those torn down by construction of the freeway, so people can raise their families there and enjoy Mother Nature, she said. Hinge Neighbors helped Makuska Powell and the other residents put some of their concerns about the Inner Loop North project into a presentation for the city's consultants and the mayor. And so the project is still in the early stages, and the Market View Heights is only one corner of the area under study for removal. But Warren said her administration is exploring options that would keep long-term residents in neighborhood communities, including potential rent-to-own housing arrangements. And I don't know if that's all really that good. Rent to own. That brings in a whole nother historical content right there, and that wasn't necessarily a good one either. And that was also in the color of law that usually it targeted black people. This rent to own, and you really weren't going to ever own it. So that was another gimmick. So I don't know how good that is. You got to be forthright with that because that's another scheme. Bringing back, bring, opening up old wounds. That's what you're doing. So city officials are scheduled to present a series of options for projects to the community this summer. So the big challenge, according to Garrick, is the new investments in American cities. Okay, they today tend to lead to gentrification, so we need to figure out how to change without displacing people. He said, so some of the positive effects of the highway removal, like decreasing pollution, air pollution, um, and increasing poverty values, can lead to displacement. So a recent study looked at the effects of replacing the Cypress Freeway in Oakland, California, which the street level boulevard, and found that the project decreased pollution and increase resident turnover. So such environmental gentrification can also happen when parks and other greenery are introduced in historically disadvantaged neighborhoods. So proposed democratic legislation hopes to avoid the paradox. And so the bill would fund community outreach and engagement by local groups, and it prioritizes capital construction grants for projects that include measures like land trust, that would ensure availability of affordable housing for local residents. So it's no longer good enough for those or for us to remove a highway and make a replacement road beautiful, said Richards of the Congress for the New Urbanisms, but we have to reconnect the neighborhoods and invest in the legacy residents. Okay, and so I thought this article was interesting. I always try to pick something that is going on with that explains basically some of the fights that we've been having here, where you see all this protesting and all these people getting upset and trying to figure out, well, why is this and why is this happening and why is that? Because this stuff was here before we were here, baby. It was. It was here before we were here. And we are the new ones trying to fight the same old battles that just won't go away. You know why they won't go away? Because they did the same thing how they taught us, how we're learning about all this discrimination. Well, they taught their kids how to discriminate and how to keep it separate and how to we were fighting against these people because we were trying to keep the money. And we was trying to keep this house. And we was trying to keep you so you can go to the good schools and stay away from those folks. And so, don't tell them what kind of stuff they're saying to these people. And so when we see the effects of it, and we see the same people doing the same thing, but they got to figure out a fancier way of separating you. They don't have redlining, they pricing you out with this gentrification. So they don't got a line drawn, but the line is still there. It just got a new way of doing it. That's basically what it is. And so, having said this in this article, and so you see, this is what we're looking at, and they leave their legacy of hate, and so we're trying to figure out how to fix that, and how to try to tear all this stuff down and try to bring people together, and they try to figure out how to make the community displaced with this gentrification and make the apartments so expensive that nobody can live there, and then the wealthy people, they don't want you moving in their neighborhood, so now you don't have no place to go, you're homeless. And so you're dealing with people who are displaced, they're homeless, and then some of them have gone to, maybe they have medical issues and they got mental illness and they become violent, and so they don't feel comfortable with making those little homeless housing projects and in on the beach here in Los Angeles and on Venice Beach in the Venice area. I heard that's what they were trying to do, make those little makeshift housing for the homeless, and they want it out. And so we are having some of the same issues And this is like a song that plays over and over again, like one of them records that you hear over and over. You're like, oh, you had the same song, we got it over here too. It's just different area, but the same song is playing. We hearing the same tune being played over and over again. So having said that, I'm gonna let this video go. So we'll see how far this thing goes. But that's what we question. Where you're gonna fix up. Right now, I see they're putting up some homes, and I think the houses. I think it's for a 2 3 bedroom, 5,000, more than $5,000 for these homes. They got project homes, these like tract homes they putting up over in I believe it's the Inglewood area called KB Housing, and I think you got to be making some money to live there. You got to be making. You got to yeah. Low income ain't gonna be able to afford that. You're not gonna be able to live in there, and they all the homes look alike. They look like a beehive. They look, but they look expensive. I'll say that look like if they want some money, and I don't know. I think that's just another clever way of them trying to move black people out, black and Hispanic, out of the communities because they know you can't afford it. And then for those that can, you got to work extra. You got beyond and above to get in there. And you got to make sure you got to keep it paid, because if you don't, you don't pay the taxes on it. I'm hearing stories where there are people who actually acquired homeownership, and because if they're in a condo, if they don't pay the HOA fees, they can lose that home. And I'm hearing some lady, she was in her, I don't know if she was in her 80s or 70s or something, in Inglewood. She actually is a homeowner, and she got a condo, and because she was behind because of the pandemic, behind in her HOA fees, $37,000 behind, I believe, that I was reading, and she's might lose her home, and that's all the home she got. All her life savings was put in there, and so you can actually get yourself to a place where you have a home and still lose it. So that we looking at stuff like that too, So it's crazy. It's everywhere. It's all kinds of stuff going on. I mean, when you become a homeowner, it's not over. It's not like, oh, I paid the house off. I don't got any. You still got to pay the taxes. And then for those that have condos, if it's not a detached home, you got to pay the homeowners association fee. And to my knowledge, from what I was reading, if you don't pay that, even if you do own the home, you get kicked out and lose it. All that money you put in the securing yourself in there, but because there's a share that you put in there of that homeowner thing, you're committed forever to pay that homeowners association fee. That doesn't go away. Just like the taxes on the home, that doesn't go away, and it must be paid, or they can come and get it. And it's as if you never paid for it. So it doesn't end, folks. So having said that, I'm gonna let this go. Nothing never ceases to amaze me. I've seen so much disgruntledness and discord and so much schemes around the housing market. It isn't funny. And I thought it was one way, but when I started reading the history of all of this, I said that, they will find every way to make things difficult and leave no stone unturned. Thanks for listening.